I need you to get on your feet. It's about to go down. Come on, get on your feet.
I can't find you. You done left me like everybody else. Anybody ever felt abandoned? Anybody ever felt rejected? Deep-rooted stuff that we finally overcame. Years that it had been digging on the inside of us. And then the one person we depend on, MIA. So we could talk about Peter and John, but I done ran back to some stuff too. Have you ever ran back to something? You were looking for something new and it was gone? So you ran back to something that was familiar? But this is the lesson. John chapter 20, verse 11. After they went back to their own home, the Bible says, somebody say, but Mary stood. She stood on the outside of the sepulcher, and the Bible says she was weeping. She was crying, but she stood. Then the Bible says she humbled herself, and she began to worship. She stooped down. And I could imagine Mary in this moment, because she didn't leave, that some stuff was going through her mind, that she had heard either Jesus speak directly or the apostles rehearse in their hearing. Stuff like, I will destroy this temple, but in 3 days. Things like, just like Jonah in the belly of the whale, so shall the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth. 3 days and 3 nights, and he should rise again. Maybe even the dissertation in chapter 12 that said a corn of wheat must fall in the ground and die. But if it die, it'll bring forth much fruit. So something on the inside of her was saying, I know I don't sing, but something ain't quite right. Somebody say she stooped down. Maybe even imagining and reflecting that day. You remember John chapter 8, verses 1 through 9. The Bible says, Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said unto him, Master, this woman, somebody say woman. Yeah, see, sometimes when you hear an old name, you can't see things clearly. All she heard was woman. No identity, but being identified with her mistake. This woman was taken in adultery, in the very act. I'm wondering where the man was. It was probably one of them. As you know, folk who have all the information. People who know everything about what happened. Yeah, say it ain't more, it's more than one person guilty in here. That's one. Now Moses in the law commanded us, they said, that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him that they might have to accuse him. Watch this. But Jesus stooped down, and with his finger rolled on the ground as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And of course, the Bible says, and again, somebody say again. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. Somebody say she stooped down. She remembered what he did for her. She remembered the power of his love and power of his forgiveness and the power of his truth. She stooped down because that's what he did. She mimicked her master. And after she stooped down back in that position where he released her from her sin, the Bible says she looked again. And now her eyes were open. I'm prophesying to somebody that if you can humble yourself in worship, that even though it hadn't been looking right, I'm telling you it's time to look again. Because the Bible says that this angel came to strengthen and enlighten her. And this time she was able to look at her situation with the eyes of faith. Then the Bible says she wanted to see him. She wanted to see him badly because she had spices. She had things she had cried over and wept over and that had been nurtured through her pain and her struggle. And according to all of the synoptic gospels, she had come to put these spices around him, but he wasn't where she expected him to be. But one thing I want to tell you about not seeing God where you expected him, at least you were expecting. And in her expectation of seeing him, I'm almost done, the Bible says, then she turned. And she saw Jesus, but she didn't recognize him. So Jesus said, woman, what you looking for? And she declared, thinking that he was just the gardener, that if she would be given the right direction, that she would go after him. Hebrews 11:6 says in the last part of that he's a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. The thing I like about Mary is that she refused to leave the scene. That even though all the brothers who had walked with him first ran, this one who came on out of her sin, she refused to leave the one that had released her. And the Bible says she asked the angel where he was. And then she asked what she thought, who the gardener that she thought was the gardener. She asked him where he was, seeking him. And then finally, because of her diligence to see him, risking her own life. Because you know she should have died at that place. But the Roman soldiers died. And what she thought was the gardener was actually Jesus. So she risked her own life. And she was rewarded. Because finally now, instead of calling her woman, he called her Mary. Somebody say, speak to me. When we seek God diligently in his resurrected power, God will begin to speak to her and speak to you. The funny thing about saying her name, he said it like he knew her. Isn't it amazing that God knows us, but he still wants to use us? Because in his resurrected state, he sees us in our resurrected state. And the Bible says in verse 16, in the New Living Translation, Mary, Jesus said, or maybe he said, Mary. Either way, it was obvious that he knew her. And he knew all about her. The Bible says she looked into the tomb and she turned herself back. She recognized somebody and she was ready to move on. And then finally he said her name. And the Bible says she turned to him. And when she turned to him, she recognized who he was. So on the resurrection day, to a group of believers, all I can say to you is that it was her turn. And it depends on where you turn. In your next move with God, it will allow you to recognize who he is and what he desires for your life. But even in that sentence, God spoke to me homophonically, meaning same sound, but meaning something different. He said, Mark, it's your turn. And I said, Lord, I'm turning to you today. He said, yeah, but it's your turn. So I'm trying to help somebody at 6 o'clock in the morning. We can go eat, because all I wanted to tell somebody this morning is that even though you might have been the last one, it's your turn. Even though things don't look like you thought they would look, it's your turn. Even though you looked in and it looked like he was gone, it's your turn. And all you've got to do is recognize him, because he knows your name. This is one of those days where you don't have to fake nothing. This is one of those days where you don't have to be something that you ain't. This ain't one of those days that you have to smile on your own. This is one of those days where God is getting ready to resurrect you from whatever it is that's been holding you down. Today, he's moving the stone. Today, he's opening up doors. Today, he's releasing miracles. Today is a new beginning. Today, there is a fresh start. Today, there is a dawning of your life, and it's all in your turn. Somebody shout, it's my turn.
I
It's
need
my
you to
turn.
get on your feet. It's about to go down. Come on, get on your feet.